So with like you being like sort of a multi-talent in the sense like you do coding, you do music, you do artwork, you do typography. Um, how do you kind of keep like maintain or like keep those skills kind of in check? Or
I
like
balance
maintain them?
them.
Yeah, how do you like balance them and like kind of maintain the skills, like not let one fall off? Like for example, let's say you're doing like a lot of coding, you're not doing as much typography, like you don't like kind of lose that skill.
There's kind of two answers.
Mhm.
There's the disappointing answer, which is I don't. Um, I'm still figuring out how to manage all these different skills.
Yeah, yeah.
Like uh, when it comes down to like the ideas of like talent and skill, I'm pretty. I think talent is fake. Like all the different things I do, I would consider myself like mainly a visual artist, and then design. Music is kind of lower down the list. Um,
Yeah.
but all these different things are skills that I've worked pretty hard over the years to gain, and there's always compromises. Like I failed really, really badly in school because I was too busy, like learning FL Studio or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess a more interesting answer is I kind of see all these different creative skills as the same thing. Like, the reason I code is not because I'm just like, I'm some type of programmer nerd and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I have to understand how computers work. I mean, I kind of like that, but
Yeah.
it's mostly just, hey, I have all this art, and I want to present it somehow. So I need a website to do that. Okay, I look at all the site makers like Squarespace or whatever, and I'm like, these templates look like shit. I'll try using it. I don't have enough control because as a designer as well, I have very particular taste over how everything looks. And
Mhm.
so I'm like, if I can't build it from the ground up from scratch, then I don't want a website at all. So it was just natural to me. Like, okay, I have this art. I have a very particular sense of design. So, I need to use that design sense to figure out how to present my art. And so, it was just it just naturally followed that I had to learn to code to put together websites, because otherwise I'm not going to have that level of control. And so it all just
Yeah.
kind of feeds into each other. With music is something that's kind of like on the back burner for me right now. I have a
Mhm.
pretty hard time actually getting music done. But kind of DJing is something I'm more into lately. But
Yeah.
it's like with visual art and writing, I kind of have these places and images in my head. And, for me, sounds and pictures are kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I'll be listening to music and it'll make me picture something in my head, but also when I'm picturing something in my head, I'll also have a sound that goes with it. So that's kind of like what I'm trying to say is basically all different creative disciplines are kind of just the same thing. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
just I just have like this world in my head and I'm just trying to get out little pieces of it different ways.
Because I want to ask you actually, another thing is I want to ask if you ever like think, for example, like you design. I was going to ask you if you would think, kind of use like your design brain in music, which kind of goes with what you were saying. Like, do you use like do you pull things kind of from design, or like think of it in like a designer's perspective while doing music or doing graphic work, or vice versa?
So if I'm like kind of are you asking if I kind of use designer brain for other
You
things?
kind of look like so basically like using like designer brain or any
Yeah.
of like your skills, you use it like in the opposite, like not in the same skill. So kind of like, for example, like, let's
Oh,
say
I see what you mean.
I do photography, I see something, I can see like how the song would be made, for example. I use
Oh,
my
for real?
photography, you know what I mean, like type of ordeal.
Yeah. See where you have visuals and pictures linking
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like synesthesia. Certain music will just put a certain picture in my head, and certain pictures will just put certain sounds in my head. And I guess the first thing you asked where it's like, do I use kind of like my more designer brain when
Mhm.
making music? Um, Whenever I've tried to do that, it kind of ends up badly because
Yeah.
design is often very technical and based around systems of grids and numbers and neatness, whereas
Mhm.
music is a lot more. Uh, if I tried to use my designer brain for music, I'd be mixing and composing with my eyes, not my ears. So that's
Mhm.
actually a habit I've had to cut out. I have like, it's the most autistic thing ever, but I basically have a system of nice numbers in my head, and I used to make everything I do snap to these nice numbers. And it was so stupid. It would be like, oh, the good numbers that I will use are powers of 2, even numbers, or like, you know, multiples of 9, like I don't know, all this bullshit. So I'd be like, okay, 44 and 45 are nice numbers, but 46 isn't, blah blah blah. And so literally when I was making music, I would click every knob and I'd type in a number, and it slowed me down so much, and it was such a bad habit. And I would get into these stupid habits of tweaking everything to be so precise, but then I realized that you can't hear it in the end result. In fact, it might actually make it sound worse because it's not as intuitive. So yeah, but I guess the only way I'd maybe use like kind of art or design brain when it comes to music is I'll have like pictures in my head, and I'm trying to, you know, when I want to make music sometimes, I'm thinking less of, I want to make a song in this genre with these sounds and instruments and melodies. I'm thinking more like, you know, I have a place in my head and I'm trying to think, what would that place sound like? Or when I'm doing, when I'm putting together mixes, right? I started DJing for my Second Life, like virtual raves, Conejo Beat, with my sister Sofa, and we were both artists, so Conejo Beat has always been like an art project. And so the last one we did in December, Holy Conejo Beat, is based around this whole theme of like, you know, the dancers ascending to heaven using like all the energy we've generated, like all the love we've generated over the past raves. And so we had this whole like heavenly theme. And so we literally like built this venue in Second Life, and it was like a church. And, you know, Sofa, she literally wrote like scriptures about Conejo. And
really?
Yeah, for real. We need to put it up somewhere. I think it's still up in Second Life. But when I was making my set for that, this actually stresses me out doing this sometimes, because it limits my freedom, but it also creates a better end result. I was thinking very hard, like, I have to make a set that's like cinematic, and every song has to like have some sort of imagery. And so, you know, I was imagining like this, you know, there's certain ambient tracks I like to play where it'll have this very kind of, sorry, I'm kind of rambling.
No, you're fine.
One idea I really like in music is the idea of like blinding light, like kind of very, very loud treble, and, you know, very rumbly low bass, but not much mid. That's something I try to incorporate
that's so
sometimes,
good,
where it's like this idea of like you're being blinded by the sound. Like, you know, with Holy Conejo Beat, I was imagining like I had a lot of moments of my set like this, where it was just like you're overwhelmed by this drone that just like blasts your ears with treble, and so it's like you're ascending to heaven, and it's just this blinding white light, and it's so overwhelming and big.
It's just a lot of overwhelming sounds at once.
And then, you know, that went into this is a really cheesy thing to bring up, but if you've ever watched the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion,
of course,
you know the title cards, like those typographic title cards.
It
would be like that serif font, like white on black, or
literally.
Black on white. And it would just be this ominous thing where, you know, I remember there's this one scene where in an early episode where Shinji is like inside the Eva, and he's like practicing the targeting system with the gun, and he's clicking the thing over and over, and then on one of the clicks it suddenly just cuts and it goes to a title card. Those types of things where it's like
so good.
So good. Just like typography in the context of like there's certain ways to use typography and design in a way that feels holy to me. Like Slash F, one of her albums, the fourth Bully, the cover is just blue with giant Times New Roman in yellow, and it just says 54%, and that's the album cover. And I found out eventually what it means, and it's if you take the numbers, if you take each number, or take each letter of the alphabet, assign it a number, you know, so A is 1, B is 2, etc. If you add up L plus O plus V plus E, you get 54. And so it's just, with Holy Conejo Beat, I was kind of imagining this whole thing, like, I was using this, like, super squashed, like, all caps Times New Roman for everything to create this, like, ominous, like, holy feel for all the titling and everything, and that went hand in hand with the sounds I was choosing, and like the venue, like the church. That was pretty inspired by Eva and like the Slash F album covers and shit like that. So that's a very long-winded answer, but
no, that's fine. Yeah, that's great. No, kind of answered like very, very thoroughly. Like you kind of
Yeah, like
take in like in
I
like
think
a lot of different skills, like kinda like
yeah, like
typography,
I
art, and
think in
music, and all of them.
I think in terms of like symbols and feelings and places, and those symbols can be in any type of format. Like they can be sounds, they can be rhythms, they can be type.
Hmm.
And so it's really all just about symbols like working together to convey something.
Yeah, to kind of bring something to light.
Yeah. And like kind of having symbols that kind of repeat across projects and cross
Mhm.
referencing. That's something I'm slowly building up over time.
Well, speaking of projects, I want to know, um, kind of when, like, if you do, kind of gauge how much you're doing at once, because like, I know from like from your portfolio website and your website and such, you're currently doing a lot, like the manga. You're doing, um, dollhouse work. You're doing other work, and just a bunch of work at once. How do you kind of gauge how many projects you're doing at once?
So if you want to know how many things I'm working on right now,
Yeah, yeah.
so right now I'm my personal projects are kind of having to be on the back burner because I'm mainly just looking for work. But
Hmm.
kind of my main project at all times for the past few years has been like my graphic novel.
Yeah.
And so that is such a like all-consuming project that uh the whole way I got diagnosed with ADHD is because I realized that I wasn't getting enough work done on this comic a couple years ago, so I went to the doctor about it.
Really?
I literally started medication to get more work done on this book, and that's still
That's
primarily
crazy.
what I use it for.
Yeah.
Because it's something I started when I was like in high school 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and all the ideas have become really convoluted. But that's one thing that I'm always kind of working on in some way. I'm always trying to come up with ideas for that book.
Hmm.
Right now it's 100 pages in, and I maybe have 50 to 100 more to go.
Hmm.
And then I shot myself in the foot recently by,
Oh.
I started coming up with an idea for my next manga, my next comic after this
Yeah.
one. And so now my attention is divided between two comic projects at once,
Oh
which is
no.
making it harder to work on my first one.
Hmm.
Recently, I released the first two chapters of
Yeah.
online for people to read, and hearing the feedback from people reading that has actually been motivating me to work on it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a second manga project called TI Terra Imperfecta, and that's also on the back burner. So I have like this whole note system, and like the two comics are like this two stories are kind of connected. Um,
Hmm.
they're both like kind of weird existential stories about robot girls trying to find their place in the world, but they're very, very different in terms of setting.
Yeah.
So I kind of consider comics and manga to be my main thing because it's just getting out these like I was saying that I always have like a world inside my head, so comics
Getting
is
out
just
the
the most
world. Yeah.
it's just the most obvious way to do it. But yeah, on top of that, I have some freelance design work I'm doing for the people at Dollhouse. I'm working on some logos for them.
Hmm.
I'm always kind of in the background compiling different music I have for sets to just if I need to play a set. Um, I don't know. It kind of I kind of give myself lots of work, but I'm still not great at managing it all. Like I
Hmm.
have all these fonts that I've designed and I've been sitting on them for years and I could be selling them. But
Yeah.
it's just putting in that final amount of work. And another big project I've had recently is kind of Meta, is my personal website. It's been kind
Yeah.
of a coding learning project and just trying to get my work out there more. So yeah, I generally like I have to keep myself busy with personal projects and art like this or else I go crazy pretty much. Like when I'm alone, I'm keeping myself company with art pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay, that
I
makes
always
sense.
have I always have a ton of shit working on. Like I you'll never catch me without a project I'm working
About a
on.
project. Yeah.
There's always something. Like I always make work for myself. That's just kind of how I'll always be.
It makes sense though, because like it sounds like at least from like my perspective, like since you have like so many like worlds and like in your mind, then it makes sense for you to like, get out so much and like always be working on something, because like at the same time, if you have like all these ideas and all this passion to do stuff, it makes sense for you to kind of like learn new skills and always have projects to be working on.
Yeah, when I learning new skills for me is purely like because I have something in mind that I want to make that I can't make without that skill. 3D modeling is something I'm slowly learning in the background.
Oh, that's so scary to me. I think I downloaded Blender one time and I just closed it. I got scared.
When I was maybe like 13, I was using Blender all the time, but I just kind of forgot, and now I have to learn it again. But I have most of the muscle memory. It's just thinking in 3D is a little difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of my art is just portraits of characters or drawings of objects, and I'm slowly starting to like conceptualize like bigger places and like make paintings and shit like that. It's pretty difficult, but that's what I'm challenging myself to do currently, is be more imaginative with places. My first comic just takes place in an existing city on Earth, but like kind of a butchered version of it. And my next story just takes place in like completely made up places.
It's kind of like you're innovating like kind of your creativity at the same time.
Yeah, it's like every project I make is me trying to learn new things, pretty much.
Which is like a good way to think about it, honestly, because I feel like a lot of people kind of just kick it with like this, which is not a bad thing, but like kick it with like the same things that they know and try to like learn new things. When they can like learn, like, you know, let's say someone, let's get like they have like a whole film in their head, but like they only do photography, so they feel like they can't do that, but they have like a whole like script and like, film and ready.
I've actually found myself like falling into that kind of hole where I'll feel like I can only do what I know, because it's actually been a while since I've really pushed myself to learn new skills, because I kind of have a few already. But lately I'm trying to reignite that passion where I'm doing multiple different things rather than just seeing myself as one thing. But yeah, it's really just, I have tons of ideas in my head, and I'm always talking to myself, like literally talking to myself. And so it's just, I have to get it out somehow, or I will actually go crazy. Like, you know, a lot of struggles I have with like identity and like mental illness, literally, the most therapeutic thing for me is to just feed it into writing. You know, anything I'm going through, once I start to wrap my head around what my problem is, I just somehow incorporate it into whatever I'm writing.
It's amazing.
Like, you know, the story I'm working on right now, which hopefully should be out later this year. It's about a robot girl named Yumi who she's kind of blissfully unaware of the fact she's a robot. But, you know, so she goes to work at this big robotics corporation that her mom worked for. And then she gets into like a freak accident at work after a while, where it's like revealed that she is a robot and that she was built by this company. And so the whole story is kind of this weird soul-searching journey where she's kind of in denial about being a robot. But her friends are like, it's actually fine, like you're basically just a person like us. She's all like, no, I'm all different, it's all weird. And it's like, but I have a hard time putting it into words outside of the actual story. Like, it's hard for me to sum up, but
kind of plays into like identity, honestly.
Yeah,
like,
the thing with
robots
robots for me is that you can do literally anything with them. So Yumi is kind of representative of a lot of different things. You know, there's to me it's kind of a trans allegory, because you know, as a trans woman, as a trans person in general, there's kind of this struggle where you're one way on the inside and you have this like soul that is a certain way, and then you have your body, which might be, you know, of a different nature, or kind of fighting like who you are inside. So, you know, kind of taking that to an extreme where, you know, you fit into society as like a normal like person, and you feel like a human, and you have like human urges, and then you find out that that's all being constructed by like a machine, which is actually totally fake.
Literally.
And so it's like, you're kind of just like longing for the experience of being human, even though it's not necessarily better or worse than what you actually are. You know, it's kind of like we're pretty much machines. We're just fleshy machines, you know. Our thoughts are just, you know, electrical impulses and like a fleshy computer, and you know, our feelings are just like hormones and chemicals floating around. So, but you know, Yumi in this story is kind of too stupid to realize that, you know, she's the same way. It's just she's a literal machine instead of like a fleshy one. So her thoughts are just computer code instead. But it doesn't matter, because all that matters is the end result is the same. You know, she's a thinking, feeling person. And you know, it's also like there's this trope in anime and visual novels and music, like from Japan, called denpa, which literally means like electromagnetic waves.
Really?
And it's something that I relate to a lot. It's basically like taking psychosis and framing it as like being someone who can receive electromagnetic signals, like receiving like radio waves.
Oh.
So these robot girls that I write, like
Yeah.
they're all like psychos, right? They can all like they're like hearing voices and shit telling them stuff, and they have like these weird like psychic senses almost.
Hmm.
Except it's literally just radio waves.
Yeah.
Um, which is something, you know, I've had psychotic episodes before, and it literally that's what it feels like. It feels like you're being like it feels like there's like radio waves going into your head. It's like really weird. So that's, you know, another thing. You know, like Yumi literally meets you know, she becomes best friends with like this schizophrenic artist girl, and then they're like, wait a sec, we're basically the same thing. It's just one of us is a robot.
Literally.
Yeah. So, you know, like a lot of weird mental problems I've had, I just rephrase them as like, oh, it's just a broken robot, or like robot with like weird programming.
That's like
And
an
I just,
interesting way to look at it, to be honest. Because
yeah,
like a lot of people, I'll say like let's say the vast majority of people definitely don't see like that. Which is like when you were talking about, I'm just like, yeah, like this is like actually fact. Like
yeah, I feel like a lot of people, and this isn't a bad thing, but
yeah.
a lot of people, when it comes to mental illness, it's something that's, you know, writing about it or whatever is kind of tiring, or it kind of rubs salt in the wound. But I'm kind of weird, and for some reason writing about it and trying to rationalize it actually helps quite a lot. Like I'm kind of just like, okay, my brain is doing all this weird shit that could, you know, potentially make for interesting stories if I just wrap my head around it somehow. You know, like the next story I'm writing is kind of similar. It's also about a robot girl, but this time it's about it's less of a, you know, this girl is one of a kind. She's a machine. She's not like other girls. Oh,
Yeah.
she's all alone. You know, this one is about a military android who's basically like a clone.
Yeah.
So there's just shit tons of copies of her basically. And so
Oh
it
wow.
takes place in the Arctic Circle in a few hundred years. So, you know, most of the Earth is like too hot to live in because of climate change.
Literally. Yeah.
And so, you know, it takes place in like, you know, Iqaluit, which is now a mega city, and this giant military organization called Lagrange builds like these machines that like control the climate, and it has like this army of robots that it uses to like conquer, you know, it's gradually trying to conquer the southern parts of Earth and like change the climate and shit, and but using violent means. Like it's pretty colonial. And then so this robot girl, who's the main character, she's like the one like defective android in this military, and so so you know, her whole programming and everything, you know, she's literally receiving like, you know, radio signals from like, you know, the heart of like this city where it has like this big like central thing that sends out commands, but she's like the only robot who's stupid enough to ignore the signals, even though it like like even though it actually
literally
like,
it's inside.
yeah, like it like yeah, oh, inside, like the game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that game is amazing. Playdead.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the next project. But yeah, like she's literally like the only one dumb enough to ignore these like psychic messages, even though it actually hurts her to ignore it. And so she's just trying to run away from the northern part of the world. She's trying to run away into like the more uninhabited parts so she can be free and like get away from like the radio signals influence. And so she goes on this journey and meets like all these like nomadic people and shit, and people who live in like these supposedly uninhabitable parts of the world. And she realizes like it's kind of gonna be a story about kind of challenging your preconceptions of the world and like what you grew up with, because she literally grew up with like crazy colonial shit. Yeah. And she's like, she can tell it's wrong, but she doesn't know quite how to confront it. She doesn't know anything else. So it's a story of her meeting like other people who are outside of it, who have grew up with something else. Yeah, I'm looking forward to actually working on that. It's gonna be a series.
That sounds so good. I'm really I'm excited to hear about it. But I think we're gonna wrap things up on the podcast. Mel, if you want to shout yourself out, all your socials, or anywhere people can find you at.
Yeah, so if you want to find me, my website is nezu.world. That's Nezu, and you can find links to my Twitter and everything on there. Yeah, you know, my name is Mel, which I don't think I actually said at the start.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm Mel or Nezu, Doña Nezita. You can find me at nezu.world. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Isaiah.
Yeah, no worries. It was a pleasure
For
having you on.
my my scatterbrained ass.
Yeah, no, it was great. No, honestly, it was a good time. But thank
Yeah,
you anybody who's
ditto.
listening currently. If you're listening to any audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, we're also available on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. And
Yeah,
we'll see you guys next week. Thank you
shout
again,
out.
Mel, for being on.
Yeah, thank you again, Isaiah.